Name's Garrett. And if there's one thing I learned the hard way, it's that sometimes the worst betrayals happen with a smile on the other side of a familiar door. It was a Tuesday, bland, forgettable, the kind you expect to pass without a scratch. I was dragging home after a brutal pitch meeting, wearing the same crumpled jacket I'd worn 3 days straight, holding a bouquet of supermarket flowers because my gut told me, don't forget tonight. It was the anniversary of our first date, not our wedding. The small things my wife, Callie, always said mattered more. The house was oddly silent when I pulled into the driveway. Her car was there. The porch light flickered like it had a secret. I remember smiling to myself, thinking maybe she had planned some surprise. God, if only. I opened the front door. What hit me first wasn't what I saw. It was the sound. Breathless laughter. Muffled moans. The unmistakable creak of our old bed frame. A sound I knew too damn well. I stood frozen in the entryway, still holding those stupid flowers like an idiot, while the life I thought I had cracked open before my eyes. I didn't charge upstairs. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe. I just stood there, and the truth settled over me like wet cement. Heavy. Permanent. Minutes later, they came down the stairs. Him first, a man built like a linebacker, shirt half-buttoned, jeans clinging to him like a second skin. Her next, my Callie, wrapped in the blanket I had bought her last Christmas, the one she said made her feel safe. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She laughed, looked me dead in the face and laughed. You're broke and worthless, she sneered, nodding toward the duffel bag she had already packed for me. Like I was some delivery she'd finally decided to return. The guy next to her, his name would come later, but it didn't matter, wrapped his arm around her waist and grinned like a wolf with a mouthful of feathers. I wish I could tell you I fought. I wish I could say I threw a punch, made a scene, set something on fire. But no, I dropped the flowers, picked up the duffel bag, and I left. What they didn't know was that while they were busy spitting on my ashes, something else was rising behind them. Something that would burn brighter than any betrayal. Because less than 24 hours later, the entire world would know my name. And trust me, they wouldn't be laughing then. I spent that night in a worn-out motel room that smelled like stale beer and cheap cologne. I sat on the edge of the bed, my duffel bag half open, Callie's laughter still echoing inside my skull. I could have wallowed, could have lost myself in anger or regret. But instead, I opened my laptop, the one thing they hadn't thought was worth tossing, and I clicked open the email I had been sitting on for 2 weeks. It was from an investor named Nolan Vance, someone most people had never heard of, but anyone in my industry knew was the real deal. Silent money. Smart money. He had one simple line in his email. Let's talk. For $100 million. It didn't feel real at first. Maybe because Callie had spent so long drilling into me that I was a failure, that my startup was a hobby, that no one would ever care about the little payment app I'd built in my crummy apartment 5 years ago. She never asked about the late nights. Never noticed when I stopped sleeping altogether. She thought I was wasting time. That I was wasting her time. And yet here it was. Proof I had built something real. Something valuable. All I had to do was say yes. I didn't respond immediately. I took a cold shower, the kind that makes you feel like your skin is splitting, then stared at my reflection until the man I used to be came back. Not the desperate husband with supermarket flowers, but the guy who knew how to bet on himself even when nobody else would. At exactly 8 a.m., I called Nolan. By 8:15 a.m., the paperwork was in my inbox. By noon, the press release was drafted. Underdog startup acquired for $400 million. The deal was closed so fast it would make anyone's head spin. But I wasn't rushing out of spite. I was rushing because I wanted Callie and her new boyfriend to see it before they finished unpacking my dresser into their shared closet. I could picture them perfectly, lounging on the couch, sipping orange juice, still laughing about how they kicked out the loser. And then, the news alert would pop up on her phone. Maybe she'd drop her glass. Maybe he'd choke mid-sip. Maybe they'd realize, too late, that the real fool wasn't the man they pushed out the door. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance. I wanted freedom. And I was about to get both, wrapped up in a way they would never forget. The world was about to change. Not for them. For me. And it was just the beginning. The morning the deal was announced, I sat alone at a coffee shop downtown, sipping black coffee and reading the news on my phone like I wasn't the man making headlines. The place buzzed with regulars. Nobody knew me. And I liked it that way. I wasn't the failure husband anymore. I wasn't the man standing at the bottom of the stairs, holding crushed supermarket flowers. I was Garrett Cole, the founder who had just sold his company for nearly $500 million. The news spread like wildfire. It was on tech blogs, finance sites, even the local paper that once printed a photo of me when I won the county science fair at 17. I couldn't stop grinning, but not out of spite. Not because of Callie, not even because of Trent, or whatever his real name was. I grinned because I knew exactly what this meant. Not just for me, but for every single person who ever told me I wasn't enough. Meanwhile, back at my old house, chaos was unfolding. Callie hadn't just betrayed me quietly. She had paraded it, flaunted it, like she was proud. She had posted a photo on social media just the night before. Her and Trent clinking glasses, captioned, "Fresh starts and better things ahead." A few hundred likes, a couple of smug comments from her friends. But now the comments were changing. Fast. Screenshots flooded in from mutual friends. Callie's phone must have been blowing up. People tagging her under news articles, her inbox probably drowning in messages saying, "Isn't this your ex-husband? Is this the guy you left? Damn, Callie, you really fumbled it." I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. The universe was handling it better than I ever could. Around noon, while I was finalizing the last signatures with my new legal team, I got a text from my buddy Vince, who still lived 3 doors down from my old house. Just a simple message. "Dude." She spilled juice all over herself when she saw the news. Trent nearly fell off the couch. I laughed out loud. A deep, real laugh that shook my whole body. People in the coffee shop turned to stare. I didn't care. It was the purest, cleanest moment of karma I could imagine. No screaming. No broken plates. No petty revenge. Just a cold, brutal realization that she had bet everything on the wrong man and lost. The best part? I was just getting started. Because money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was still to come, and it would hit harder than anything she had ever expected. The beauty of success is that it doesn't just make noise, it attracts it. Within 24 hours of the announcement, my inbox was flooded. Old acquaintances pretending they had always believed in me. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to since high school. Even teachers from my grade school sending proud messages. It was surreal. A week ago, I was nobody. Today, I was being asked to speak at conferences, mentor startups, do interviews. I said no to all of it. I wasn't chasing attention. I just wanted peace. Something that, until now, I hadn't realized how badly I needed. I moved into a furnished penthouse downtown. Nothing flashy, just clean, sharp, and high above the noise. The first night I stood by the window, city lights stretching out like a living map beneath me, and I realized something. Callie wasn't even the real heartbreak. It was the years I wasted letting someone clip my wings just so she could feel taller. And now? Now there was no ceiling. I was finally free. It was about 3 days after the deal closed when it happened. I was sipping a bourbon, flipping through channels without really watching anything, when my building's front desk called. Mr. Cole? There's 2 people here asking to see you. They say they know you personally." I didn't need them to say the names. I already knew. Part of me wanted to tell the desk clerk to throw them out. But curiosity? Curiosity won. "Send them up," I said, voice steady calm. I poured myself another bourbon and waited by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching headlights weave through the city. When the knock finally came, I didn't rush. I wanted them to wait, to think. When I opened the door, there they were. Callie and Trent. But they weren't the smug, confident couple who had laughed at me from the top of the stairs. No, they looked wrecked. Callie's makeup was smeared like she'd been crying, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her too-short jacket. Trent stood awkwardly beside her, his posture deflated, his fake confidence bleeding out onto my doormat. "Garrett, we just want to talk," Callie said, her voice a scratchy whisper. "We made a mistake." Mistake. It rolled around my head like a bad joke. You didn't make a mistake, I thought. You made a choice, and you made it while laughing. I didn't say a word. I stepped aside, letting them see the life they threw away, the luxury, the success, the peace. They didn't belong here anymore, and they knew it. Standing there under the cold lights, with all their lies stripped away, they looked small. So much smaller than the versions of them I had carried like weights on my back. I let the silence drag out until it became unbearable. And then, with a slight tilt of my head, I said the only thing they deserved to hear. "You two look thirsty." Might want to grab some juice downstairs. And I closed the door in their faces, locked it, bolted it, and poured myself another drink. The view outside hadn't changed, but everything else had. After I closed the door on Callie and Trent, I stood there for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of them shuffling back down the hallway, like two kids who had been caught sneaking around the wrong house. I thought maybe I'd feel some kind of triumph, maybe satisfaction. Instead, what settled inside me was something cleaner: indifference. Their existence no longer had weight in my world. They were just noise fading into the distance. I didn't tell anyone about their visit. Not my lawyer, not my friends, not even Vince, who had practically begged me to dish out all the juicy aftermath. I didn't owe anyone that story. This part, the part where I chose myself, it was mine. Still, the universe wasn't quite done dragging their mess into the light. A few days later, I got a call from a mutual friend, Heather, someone I hadn't heard from since long before the divorce. She wasn't one for drama, which made her message even more delicious. Heather had run into Callie at a local bar. Apparently, things hadn't exactly gone according to Callie's plan after she kicked me out. It turned out Trent wasn't some successful entrepreneur like he had claimed. He wasn't even stably employed. He worked odd jobs, lived off side hustles, and spent money faster than he made it. Within a week of moving into the house I once called home, they were behind on the mortgage. The utilities were racking up. Creditors were calling. Apparently, the fresh start wasn't so fresh after all. And Callie? She had tried to leverage sympathy from her friends, spinning the narrative that I had blindsided her by hiding the company's success. But screenshots don't lie, and everyone had seen her smug post from the day she kicked me out. Nobody was buying her story. Slowly, people who once filled her birthday parties and engagement photos started disappearing. Invitations ignored. Calls unanswered. Friends she had once paraded around like trophies now wanted nothing to do with her. Meanwhile, I was busy planning my next move. I had options now, real options. I started investing in causes I cared about. I bought a minority stake in a nonprofit tech incubator helping underprivileged kids break into coding. I hired a private trainer, not to impress anyone, but because for the first time in years, I wanted to take care of myself, not just survive for someone else's approval. One evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, I sat on my penthouse balcony, nursing a whiskey, watching the world turn gold and red. And I realized something. Losing Callie was never the tragedy. Trusting the wrong people, giving them the best parts of me, that was the tragedy. But now? Now every step I took was my own. Every breath was mine. No more begging to be seen. No more shrinking myself to fit inside someone else's tiny idea of what I should be. The real betrayal wasn't just what Callie did to me. It was what I had allowed for far too long. And that part? That part was over for good. Weeks turned into months, but the fallout from Callie's betrayal kept rippling through town like a stone dropped in a shallow pond. I tried to stay out of it, honestly. I didn't check her socials, didn't ask mutual friends for updates. I wasn't interested in feeding old wounds. But the updates had a funny way of finding me anyway. Every so often, I'd get a text or overhear a conversation, a reminder that while I had moved forward, they were still drowning in the mess they made. One afternoon, I bumped into Heather again while grabbing lunch at a small bistro downtown. She looked hesitant at first, probably unsure if I wanted to hear what she had to say. But curiosity got the better of both of us. She told me that Trent had been arrested a few nights earlier. Some scam he was running under the table finally caught up with him. Fraud charges. Not the good kind of white-collar mistakes that get cleaned up with hush money, either. Real consequences. And Callie? Apparently, she was spiraling. She had lost her job not long after the news of the acquisition broke. Turns out her boss didn't appreciate employees who embarrassed the company by being the punchline of half the town's gossip. She tried to latch on to new guys, tried to play the same old game, but it didn't work anymore. The shine was gone. The mask had cracked. Hearing it didn't bring me joy. Not really. I wasn't sitting around plotting her downfall or laughing at her misery. I had loved her once, truly, foolishly, and even when someone betrays you, a part of you remembers the good before the rot set in. But there was a strange peace in knowing I didn't have to lift a finger. Life had a way of settling debts all by itself. Meanwhile, my own world kept expanding. I started traveling, something Callie always claimed we couldn't afford when she was busy maxing out credit cards on designer handbags. I spent a month in Maine, bought a weathered little cabin by the lake, and restored it by hand, something that grounded me, gave me a sense of creation outside of screens and spreadsheets. I met new people too, Not the kind who smiled wide and sharp to see what they could take, but real people. A different kind of world, one I realized had been waiting for me the moment I was brave enough to leave the old one behind. One evening, back at the penthouse, I found a letter slipped under my door. No stamp, no address, just my name written in handwriting I knew too well. Callie. For a moment, I considered throwing it straight into the trash. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. I opened it. Inside was a single-page apology. No long explanations. No excuses. Just one line that stuck with me. You were never the failure. I was. There were no demands, no pleas for a second chance. Just silence after the confession. I sat there for a long time, staring at the words, feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness, no joy. Just a clean, sharp emptiness, the kind you feel after finally pulling out a splinter that had been festering too long. I didn't write back. I didn't call. I didn't even think about it after that night. Some ghosts are better left in the rear view, and mine were disappearing fast. By the time winter rolled in, the city outside my penthouse had transformed. Streets dusted with snow, lights strung across balconies, strangers wrapped in scarves laughing as they hurried along. It was the kind of season that forces you to take stock of your life, to notice who's still standing with you when the days get short and cold. For the first time in years, I didn't dread it. I welcomed it. I spent Christmas Eve alone, but not lonely. There was a calm to it, a steady warmth that filled the space Callie once hollowed out. I roasted a simple dinner, poured a glass of wine, and sat by the fire watching the city shimmer. No chaos. No accusations. No one mocking my dreams while secretly plotting their escape. Just me, my new life, and the crackling sound of peace growing roots inside my chest. In the new year, opportunities that once seemed like far-off dreams started landing in my lap. I invested in startups led by scrappy, brilliant founders who reminded me of myself when I first started. I bought an old bookstore in town, the kind of cozy place with creaky floors and mismatched shelves, and hired a team to help me restore it into a cafe/reading nook. People thought I was crazy, that a millionaire would care about some broken-down shop. But it wasn't about the money. It was about building something real, something that couldn't be measured just in dollars. It wasn't long before a new circle of people started orbiting around me, people who valued loyalty over status, grit over gossip. There was no pretending in this world. If you didn't show up real, you didn't last. And somewhere between buying second-hand furniture for the cafe and mentoring a few kids who wanted to learn coding, I met someone new. Her name was Lainey. Not flashy. Not desperate for attention. She had a laugh that didn't sound rehearsed and a mind sharper than anyone I'd ever met. We crossed paths at a tech charity event I almost didn't attend. She spilled coffee on my shoes and cursed so colorfully under her breath that I couldn't help but laugh. When she realized who I was, not the headlines, but the real me, she didn't flinch. She didn't gush. She just smiled and said, "Everyone's got a story. Yours sounds like it's just getting interesting." We didn't fall into each other's arms. There were no fireworks or movie moments. It was quieter than that, steady, careful, real. Exactly what I needed after years of living in the shadow of someone else's selfishness. One evening, after a long day at the bookstore, I found myself at the new cafe space, sitting with Lainey, sipping black coffee and planning renovations. As the sun dipped low and bathed the room in gold, she raised her mug toward me and said, "To new beginnings." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I raised mine back without hesitation. "To new beginnings," I echoed. No bitterness. No ghosts. No fear. Just hope, raw, stubborn, and finally mine again. Spring crept into the city like a whispered promise, and with it, my life took on a rhythm I hadn't realized I was craving. The bookstore opened in late March. We kept the original creaky floors, added mismatched chairs, strung up fairy lights, and painted the walls in deep, cozy colors. It wasn't polished, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. Every day, people wandered in, some to grab coffee, some to lose themselves in forgotten pages, some just to sit quietly in a place that didn't demand anything from them. It felt like home. Lainey became part of that world effortlessly. Not because we needed each other to survive, but because we chose to show up, again and again. There was something sacred about that kind of choice. No pressure, no expectations, just two people building something sturdy where so much had once been fragile. One afternoon, as I wiped down tables after closing, she wandered over holding a tattered paperback she'd found hidden behind a shelf. She smiled, tossing it onto the counter. "Funny," she said, leaning in with that mischievous glint in her eye. You keep rescuing things everyone else thought were worthless. I laughed, a real, full laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from myself in years. Maybe I'm just stubborn, I said. Or maybe, she replied, reaching for my hand, you finally learned to see value where it actually matters. It hit me then, more than ever, Callie and Trent were a closed chapter. No anger, no regrets left to wring out. Their choices had sent me down a path far better than the one I would have lived if I had stayed trapped in their idea of me. Their betrayal wasn't a death sentence. It was a release. Later that evening, as we locked up the store, I stood outside under the faded city lights, breathing in the cool night air. I thought about the man I used to be, the one who stood frozen in a doorway, holding dying supermarket flowers, wondering what he did wrong. I barely recognized him anymore. And that was a good thing. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need them to know how well I was doing. The real victory wasn't in proving anyone wrong. It was in living so fully, so honestly, that their opinions no longer mattered. A car honked in the distance, laughter floated up from a nearby bar. The city pulsed with life, and so did I. I slipped my hand into Laney's, and together we walked down the street toward a future untouched by betrayal, regret, or bitterness. Not everyone gets a second chance. Not everyone dares to take it. But I did. And this time, I wasn't letting go.